The lesson.
Oh yeah.
Particularly for the younger cats.
Yeah.
That really would not have any sort of connection to how it was back then. Give us a brief rundown on what it was like, you know, in that era when you're going to shows, whether it's to watch it or to perform at that shit.
Yeah.
Give us a bit of a rundown of like what the atmosphere was like.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because, like I said, you think when the scene here was very small, it was we did gigs or went to gigs where there was 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 guys. And back when graph beefs were still really prevalent, you'd have two sides of town or rivaling crews that were there. So there was always a tension in the air anyway. And then someone might not like the look of you, so you didn't want to get caught up in that as well. Or you might have wanted to get caught up in it, depending on how you were. So just going to a gig was a different scenario, being a punter in the crowd. And as I said before, let alone being a performer and getting up and potentially not being liked or for whatever reason, you know, you had to have some serious balls or be fucking stupid enough to do so, you know what I mean? It was a case of saying, all right, well, I believe strongly enough in what I want to do that I'm going to get up there and flex it, irrespective of what the 30 guys out here think. You know, I got my 4 guys here in the corner that are like, they want to see it too. So this is for us, you know, and I guess, you know, you do that and you sort of prove yourself enough. If you have got skills, then you hopefully that these guys are going to buy in a little bit more and they're going to say, oh yeah, man, check this dude out next time or whatever. But there was definitely a lot of tension in the air, a lot of fights at shows. I mean, I think it's endemic in our culture that gigs that start up and they shut down and they start up and they shut down. And I think that stems back to a culture which it was that ingrained into, that it was a no-brainer, you know what I mean? And we went from seeing shows start up and that night, it's never gonna, we're gonna start up this weekly show, and by the end of that night, it's never coming back, you know what I mean? You know, you could be lucky enough to come along and check that shit out and leave with your shoes and without getting staunched out, or you might have got caught up in some shit. You know, it's just kind of luck of the draw, or who you're rolling with, or who you know. And so, you know, I give massive respect to all the artists that paved the way and that had the nuts first and foremost, and the skill obviously to get up and rock a show at all these venues, Australia-wide as well. It's not just Melbourne. Shit was happening in Sydney, Adelaide, Brizzy, you know. But to actually get up and do it, but also, you know, to the guys that actually just went out there and supported, you know what I mean? Because, you know, I see guys whinge about having to pay $20 for a gig now. Well, you had to pay $20 for a gig back then, and you might have actually got fucking shanked and go home with your socks on, mate. You know what I mean? Like, that's how it was. Like, nowadays, you're just complaining about fucking 2 drinks worth. You can't get in. Come on, man. Support the people that you love, you know? So it was extra real then. And you weren't driving, you know, everyone was catching trains, so you had to run the risk on the train trip in as well that some shit was going to go down. So, you know, that's why I respect everyone that was there coming up in that time, being a part of the culture, whether it was as an artist, whether it was as a, you know, performer, or whether it was just someone who was supporting the scene, you know.
Do you have any memorable, like, gigs where shit just hit the fan?
Yeah, I've got a lot, but as a question without notice, one came to my mind before when we were talking about it, and I remember there was a gig in Melbourne in Collingwood, and I can't remember, I don't even know if we were on, we might have been, but I remember shit got so out of hand, it was next level, where the bouncers just submitted, they got cleaned up, bystanders were getting smashed with, you know, stools. You know, as fucked up as it is, like even the ambulance guys were getting caught up and bottled and dragged out and fucking, you know, like next level shit, you know what I mean? And that does kind of bring him, I just can't remember if we were performing at it or not, but I was there for it and I saw it unfold. I couldn't believe it was next level. But, you know, unfortunately, a lot of lyrical commission shows came with some violence as well. We had a lot of fans that were you know, riders that potentially had beefs, or thugs or crims that were robbing dudes, or didn't take kindly to someone that didn't look at them right, you know what I mean? Like whatever the reason was. So we saw a lot of our shows get shut down. Actually, I have got another one. I remember we did Sydney. It was the one and only Lyrical Commission show in Sydney. And there was a lot of, speaking of the tension in the air, we had some tension in Sydney due to some sort of, you know, off the cuff kind of tongue-in-cheek remarks, and we had to have all these meetings in place before we even went there to settle with the crews to make sure that everyone was fine for LC to come. And when we did the show at the Gaelic Club, we were fine, but shit jumped off at the end of our set. We finished up and the DJ jumped on and some fucking major shit went down, and I think the proprietor got bottled, and there was just a shitstorm of fucking SWAT police coming in with shields up and shit, spraying tear gas. We ducked off out the back. They actually cordoned off the entire street, and Central Station in Sydney, as in Central Train Station, is across the street. And I vividly remember they had cordoned off the entire street, or the bottom half of it, and they blocked off the entry into the train station, all due to the shit that went down at our gig sort of thing. So, I mean, you know, some poor people got caught up in that probably didn't need to, but again, respect to them for coming out and chancing their luck. There's more, man. I remember Adelaide one time, actually, we came to do a show.
Jimmy Rose?
Not Jimmy Rose, some pool Sharkies. We came to Adelaide, we did 2 shows in the weekend. We did the uni or something. Or
Adelaide Uni Bar?
Yeah.
And what year was this?
What was it? It must have been I can't even remember, excuse my memory, man. I can't remember what we came over for, if it was LC or... actually, it was an LC show, but I can't quite remember who was there. But anyway, we did Adelaide Uni Bar. It would have been early 2000s anyway. And we did that on the Friday night, I think. That was cool. It was a small crowd, but it was hype. And we were set to do Sharkey's the night after. And anyway, we went to Sharkey's in the early evening and did our sound check, booted back to the hotel at Glenelg to get a bite to eat. And I remember when we went in for the sound check, I was sort of like, oh yeah, it's a pretty chill spot, you know. Bit of a vibe in the air, but it was cool. I was cool with it. And I was like, how do they sort of flip this into a show, you know, because it was a pool joint. And they were like, yeah, you would do this. And anyway, I can't even remember if we did a proper sound check, but it was all cool. We were coming back. So we went back to the hotel, and yeah, we were literally jumped in the elevator to come back to the gig, and the promoter got a fucking phone call to say, oh man, shit's fucking just jumped off big time. And we were sort of like, oh yeah, you know, what's the deal? And he's like, oh man, apparently like fucking one of the bouncers has fucking been KO'd and he's had his gat taken off him. And fucking dudes are letting off shots in the fucking pool hall. And we were just like, we were bugging on it, man. Like we were kind of laughing, but at the same time a bit worried, but sort of like, fuck, this is next level shit. You know what I mean? Like going by the stories that I already told you, this was kind of like another level. It's like, so what, like, and then it was kind of like, well, what are they like grabbing the guns to shoot us, or are they just like wilding, or are they fucking upset at the venue, or you know what I mean? And anyway, as it turned out, you know, so we kind of started to go there, and then in the end, dudes were like, nah, it's shut down, the gig's done, go back to the hotel. So found out a little bit more later on who was involved and shit like that, and where it kind of went to, and what the reasoning behind it was. You know, whether it was sold out or they weren't allowed in or something, and just kind of got a bit fucking, probably, I won't say next level, I'll say about 3 levels, but yeah. I don't know what your take on that night is, but yeah, that sounded pretty rugged to me. The funny thing is we actually, because we were like, fuck, how do we take that? Do we kind of build on that as like, you know, because there was media reports, I think, that night. So we were kind of like, do we get on the front foot and sort of push this as a notorious rap crew, LC's hit Adelaide and this has happened, and how would that affect from a publicity perspective and all that sort of, you know, all that sort of shit. But yeah, it was kind of, I can't remember if it's actually true, but I think I was told that there was some kind of write-up where that was the case the next day or a couple of days later when it was, you know, as it was broadcast in the media, whether it was the TV or the newspaper or some shit, I can't remember. But yeah, anyway, that was pretty full on. But I didn't physically see that go down. But yeah, we were there in Adelaide for it, and unfortunately the show didn't happen. So we've done shows where we've done shows where we've actually had guys on stage with us, you know, ready to jump in and solve a situation. And I'm not talking about security, I'm talking about our own people, due to threats and whatever. And at the same time, we've even dealt with shit ourselves, you know. I remember, just going back a bit to the Culture of Kings shit, I remember the Culture of Kings gig in Melbourne. I remember it was Sir Rec, Unique was performing, was it Celsius I think at the time. And I remember some dude was haggling him at the show, sort of down the front row, and I think he might have chucked something. And I can't remember if Strut was in the crowd at the time or backstage at the time. I got a feeling he was backstage. But I remember he must have come out and he's like picked out this dude and he's just bailed off the stage into the crowd and just started like giving it to this dude who disrespected one of the culture's true kings in Sir Rec Unique, you know what I mean? And rightfully so, mate, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, that was some sucker shit and he deserved to catch a beat down. So, you know, we've handled it, you know, we've dealt some justice ourselves from time to time, but, you know, yeah, it's a different time now. I mean, that shit may still go on, I don't know, but I think it definitely seems like a little bit more, there's more of a cool party vibe in the crowd now than there used to be, that's for sure.
The lesson. Oh, yeah.